Household energy bills are set to rise again, with the average annual cost climbing to £1,755 from October, adding a lot more pressure on consumers that are, of course, already feeling the cost of living pinch.
Well, Labour, which pledged to cut energy bills by up to £300 by 2030, now faces criticism as prices rise under their government. Cabinet Office Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I mean, it's not good news for people, is it? Energy bills going up again. We already have a significant number of people in fuel poverty, and your government had pledged to bring bills down.
Look, firstly, any rise in bills is a worry for families across the country. And what we are seeing, I'm afraid, are energy prices continuing at a significantly higher level than they were prior to Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Wholesale prices of gas still 75% higher than they were then. What the government is doing is two things. Firstly, getting help to people now. That is why we are expanding the Warm Homes discount worth £150 to families to 2.7 million additional households for this winter. And secondly, to deliver those lower bills and indeed that energy security that we need, driving forward with clean, homegrown renewables and indeed civil nuclear, so that we aren't at the whims of dictators like Putin, which is what happened to us back in 2022.
Coming back to the economy, it's just bad news after bad news, isn't it? I mean, 2% rise, which is more than was expected. Inflation's going up. Long-term government borrowing is near a 27-year high. I mean, when is this economy of ours going to turn around? Well,
listen, I'm not going to suggest anything other than that we've had to take difficult decisions to stabilise the economy over the past 12, 13 months. But that stability has allowed interest rates to come down, which is obviously very important for families up and down the country. And we are getting help to families. It will be the first week back of the school term next week. And for families up and down the country, we are and have been rolling out school breakfast clubs. We've been expanding free school meals, reducing the number of branded items that parents have to buy for school uniforms, again to try to reduce costs for families. But that economic stability has to be the foundation upon which everything else is built. We saw what happened with Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget back in September 2022, and the price that was paid for that by families up and down the country. We won't take that risk.
But economists, though, don't seem to agree that the economy is being managed very well at the moment, because they're talking about this moron premium, aren't they? And they're saying this is whereby investors charge countries more to borrow because of previous policy mishaps. This is concerning the long-term borrowing costs, which are reaching this 27-year high. So they're quite clearly pointing the finger at Rachel Reeves and her policies, aren't they, for causing this?
Well, no, I mean, the debt level that we inherited was high, but that had been built up over the 14 years of the previous government. It's one of the challenges that we inherited in July 2024, and what the Chancellor has been doing, setting out her ironclad fiscal rules, ensuring that on day-to-day spending, for example, we are not borrowing for that. What she is doing is putting the public finances on a stable footing. I'm not denying the difficult and tough decisions we've had to take, but they are the tough decisions we have taken for the country. The worst thing we could do is take risks for the economy and allow working people up and down the country to pay the price. We won't do that.
OK. Now, you obviously will have seen the papers this morning. You'll hopefully have been poring over the front pages. Daily Mail leads with Nigel Farage's promise for US-style mass deportations, if, of course, his party, Reform, wins the next election, and a vow to remove women and children as well. We've got the Telegraph reporting that the Taliban, as we've just been discussing here, are ready and willing to work with Farage and accept deported Afghan nationals if he becomes Prime Minister. And we've got the I paper saying that the proposal involves agreements with Iran's Ayatollah. You've had just under 24 hours to let this all sink in. What's your considered response to the extreme measures which were announced yesterday? Do you kind of wish in some ways you'd been able to say it first?
It's part of a pattern with Nigel Farage. He stokes a problem, he stokes a grievance, he then offers completely unworkable and unrealistic solutions. He was talking about detention centres. He won't tell you where they are. He was challenged about women and children. He can't tell you what's going to happen to them. He's also talking about negotiating particular deals with countries that are hostile to us, when he can't even negotiate the politics of a parliamentary party you could fit in the back of a taxi. And I am out today talking about the new deal that this government has secured with the European Union, which is going to be good for jobs, good for borders, good for bringing down household bills and food prices. But this is crucial, Richard, because...
Minister, I'd be grateful if you didn't change the subject. I promise you we'll come on to the reason that you come on this morning, but can we keep it to the question?
Because he is warning that the Channel migrant invasion is a genuine threat to public order. And in his mind, he's addressing concerns in a system that haven't been suitably addressed by you, by the Conservatives before. Not enough is being done under your government to tackle this situation. And that has created this public feeling that more action needs to be taken.
Look, there is no doubt at all that we need to take more action. But we've already been taking action as well. That is why we have prevented 12,000 crossings, small boat crossings, from happening that otherwise would have done. That is why we are working at smashing the criminal smuggler gangs. That is why there are arrests happening. There was one only last month, a group based in Botswana that was actually facilitating illegal migration to the United Kingdom. That's why we're putting in place our pilot scheme with France to our one-in, one-out deal that will mean we can fly people back who've crossed the Channel to France, but also the work we're doing to change French maritime law as well.
Minister, the voters' perception is, whatever you may say here and in other interviews, the perception out there in the real world by voters is that this government has lost control. 70% of the British public thinks that Labour's dropped the ball on immigration. Whatever you might say, whatever figures you might quote here, that's the perception. And if you don't catch up with reform and at least do something, not just to challenge what they've said, but to come up with your own radical proposals, the chances are, and this is a common perception this morning, you're probably going to lose the next election.
Look, we will certainly be judged at the next election, of course, and we should be. But this isn't coming up with outlandish promises that are not going to work. This is about doing the hard yards of delivery. It's recognising that there is no silver bullet in terms of solving this problem. It's about changes in our domestic law. We're currently putting through Parliament a bill that will give powers to our law enforcement to tackle people smugglers that are equivalent to the powers they would have to tackle terrorists, being opposed tooth and nail, by the way, by the Conservatives and Reform. But it's also about that work that we are doing internationally with the French. And this is where, frankly, the work that I'm doing with the EU is relevant to this issue, because the work that I've been doing with the EU is about securing things like better sharing of criminal records, better sharing of facial recognition data. They are things that are going to show that criminals have no place to hide on our continent. And listening to Nigel Farage yesterday, he seemed more interested in doing a deal with the Taliban than he did in doing a deal with the European Union that's going to keep people on our streets safe.
Well, tell us about your deal then. This, you're chasing a permanent food and drink deal with the EU. How will that work?
So what we are saying today, and I'll be saying today, is that I want to get these measures in place by 2027. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to make trade easier in food and drink. There are businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises included in those, that have frankly stopped trading with the EU altogether due to the red tape and due to the cost. So just give you one specific example. The export health certificate, which has to be paid per consignment of goods for animals and animal products, so we're talking about food that's being exported, not £200 per lorry or an annual fee, but per consignment. That is one example of the charges our businesses are facing. I want to sweep those charges away. And my challenge, whether it's to Conservatives or Nigel Farage, who opposed this deal before they even read it, is be honest with the public. If you want to oppose this deal, you are imposing and going to reimpose costs on businesses. You're going to be looking backwards at the next election, not forward, and risking higher prices for families up and down the country, and they should be honest about that.
Well, there are those, though, that are saying that this is reversing Brexit by the back door, and there are also concerns about the concessions being made, aren't there? We already have this situation with European fishermen and access to UK waters, and there are concerns that actually, you know, it's rowing back on what has already been agreed.
No, the manifesto we were elected on promised that we would actually secure this food and drink agreement with the European Union. It also said we wouldn't rejoin the single market, we wouldn't rejoin the customs union, we wouldn't go back to freedom of movement. We've absolutely kept those promises. It isn't about reversing Brexit, it's about making Brexit work in the context of the mid-2020s and where we now find ourselves. And in relation specifically to the question about fish, we've agreed a multi-year agreement to give stability to our fishing industry. That's why we're going to invest over that period £360 million in our coastal communities and to upgrade our fishing fleet. And what we've also done with that food and drink agreement is made it easier for our fishers to be able to export to the European Union. Around about 70% of our catch is exported to the European Union. So it's absolutely in the interest of our fishers to be able to do that with less cost and less red tape. So this agreement delivers for our fishers, but it delivers for families up and down the country as well. That's the case I'm going to be out making today.
Mr. Thomas-Symonds, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Have a good day. Thank you.